Hello and welcome, Trevor from Bookmanager here, and today I'm going to be giving you strategies on transitioning your existing Webstore content over to the new Webstore Designer system. This new system allows for a lot more layout creativity, a lot more consistency between elements, so making sure all your headlines look the same. Our new system makes a lot easier and simpler to set up, whereas our old system, everything was kind of styled and created in isolation, and so it was a lot of work to maintain consistency, and that was our big idea behind the new system. So today's video, again, is about the transition process. Many of you have been using the old site content creation system for years, some over 10 years. What I want to present to you is the best way to tackle this process of taking your current consumer site and rebuilding it. We tried as we might, but we just couldn't figure out a way to transition your content automatically for you, to basically switch on the new system and then poof, your whole site is already kind of built out for you. They're just two totally different systems. Again, our new system is all preset based, kind of template based, has all these component blocks. It'll make sense in a second. The old system was very rough HTML, CSS in the background at least. And so we couldn't port it over, at least we couldn't port it over in a way that was going to be beneficial to you in the long run. It would probably have made a bigger mess overall. So you have to recreate your pages one at a time on the new system. But what is ported over, there are a few things that are ported over that I'll get to in a second. You don't have to grab things like your kind of default colors or recreate your menu system. That is great, but the content itself, we'll get into the strategy of how to do that. My first tip for you is, if possible, to do this on two monitors. If you happen to have a two monitor setup, duplicating or mirroring or grabbing inspiration from your existing site will be a lot easier, because then you can have essentially your current consumer site open in one tab and the Webstore Designer open in another. So definitely, if you have access to that, it'll make it easier. But for today's demo purpose, since I can only record one screen at a time, I'll be just switching between tabs. To start off, we need to go to the Biz site. So to access the Webstore Designer, you need to go to biz.bookmanager.com. And before we even go to the designer itself, we need to make sure that our login has access to the designer. Head over to Settings, then go under Permissions if your login allows it. Otherwise, you may need to find a login that has admin access to the permissions area. And then scroll down the list and find your name on the list, and make sure that Site Content and Appearance is checked off. That gives you access to the Webstore Designer. Once you've given access to the various staff that you want to be working on the new Webstore Designer, you can head on over to the Content tab, and there will be a Webstore Designer link. Now, while I'm recording this, we haven't released this publicly to everyone yet, so it's grayed out, but when you are watching this video, this will be unlocked, and you can just click on Webstore Designer to open a new tab with the designer open. So I'm just going to access it another way right now. And since I've already accessed our designer, our own bookstore is in the midst of rebuilding our site. So we're just transitioning, right now. When you first visit the designer for the very first time, you will be presented with a pop-up that gives you a basic overview of what to expect, what has happened through this transition. It will give you a link to the Help Center for documentation. And at the very bottom, it'll give a Let's Go button. And once you click on Let's Go, that will initiate the designer for your store. Once you click Let's Go, it's going to do a few things. It's going to copy over the menu system from your current consumer site. So you'll find that right off the bat, even though you're going to end up on a home page and it's going to be blank, it's going to have all your menus that are currently up on your consumer site preloaded. Hooray, so you don't need to recreate those. The next thing you're going to notice is the colors from your existing site, at least those specified in the Appearance tab. So if I go and look at the old admin site, click on the pencil icon, click on the Appearance tab. This is how you set up your coloring for your search bar and your menu system here. These colors, these 6 colors, will have been ported over onto the Webstore Designer. So you'll find that you've got your colors set here, and your menus are in place, and the information, say, from your footer is pulled in. But otherwise, the middle of your site, on each page, that is what we couldn't bring over and what you're going to have to recreate. You may also not have your logo brought in. I can't remember if that's automatic or not. Re-adding your logo up here is quite simple. We'll get to that at the end. Now, a quick note about once you have transitioned over, I mentioned that the menu system is brought over and the appearance is brought over. At this point, once you've clicked on Let's Go to initiate this, you are no longer going to be managing or can manage your site menus and your appearance, your colors on the old system. So if you go back to the old V1 admin site and go to Site Pages, and if I make a change here, this won't affect your live consumer site anymore. So if you need to make a change to a name of a menu, you need to add a new menu, you need to change the order of a menu here, you need to now do this on the Webstore Designer. You need to do it through this new system, which I'll get to in a minute. The next thing that also won't be affected on the old site is the Appearance tab. So if you go here and change any options here, this will not do anything anymore. And same with the Events tab. Really you should be using the new Biz site. This has been up on the Biz site for a year or more now. Managing events is done there now. So really these three tabs are kind of, just don't use them. The site content though is still being used. So you'll find that right now, even though on the Webstore Designer, the homepage is blank, here on my live site, it still has content on it. If I refresh this, it's still good. And where that content is coming from is the old system. So the idea is all your pages are all fleshed out from the old system, at least the site content. And this gives you the opportunity to rebuild them on the new system. And then when you're ready to go, then we can activate them. So you will find that on the top of every single page, there's a banner that says this page is not live. And it's got a blue activate button. That's it. You basically, until you press that button, this page's content, no matter how you lay it out, what you want to do with it, it's not going to be swapped in. As soon as you've built out a page and you're ready to go, that's when you click on the activate button and you are ready to make it live and swap it out on your live site. Once you've activated that page, at that point, that's when the site content for that particular page will no longer be followed on the old system. So that's where if I activate the home page, then if I come back here and I make edits here, nothing will happen because it's now referring to the new Webstore Designer for the actual content. So keep that in mind. There are three main areas to the Webstore Designer. There is the central design area where you drag and drop and visually design your content, your text, your lists, your layout, the styling of everything. That is all done in the middle area here. You also have a left-hand panel where all of your different content components are located. So this is where we can drag in components onto the site. Then we have a tab for styling, all the text and colors and buttons and all the visual styling and presets that are assigned to different components are set up under the Styles tab. This is again going to make everything very consistent and easy to manage. Then you have your menu tab here. This is where we manage the menu system. You can essentially preview all this in either a desktop monitor preview. So there's three icons right at the top. So by default, monitor preview is selected, but I can choose tablet. I can also choose phone. I would recommend designing desktop first and then checking to make sure it still looks good on the phone or the way you anticipate. There are not different settings based between the phone and the desktop. So you don't need to say mock up a desktop layout and then switch to phone mode and do it all over again and remock up everything. We are able to intuit how things should break and rearrange and reposition on the phone. We're trying to avoid all that overhead of you having to design basically 2 or 3 different sites depending on your customer's screen size. So we may add some particular options down the road for that fine control, but right now we're starting simple and saying, nope, you don't have to worry about it, but start off designing desktop first. As well as the live design preview you've got here, there is a more accurate preview for what is actually going to be on your consumer site, what your customers will see, and that is accessed through the preview button. So clicking on the preview button will give you a more apples to apples comparison. If I look at my current site, you can see again, even though it's blank, the top area changes very little. It's more accurate. And once again, there is a panel here to switch to look at phone mode or tablet, so you can see how everything looks on those various screen sizes. The design mode here has markup on it, and the spacing isn't always consistent, isn't always exactly how it will be represented. So definitely use the preview button to get that more accurate representation of what's going on. We're going to start off with the styles tab. So even though the content tab comes first, I'm going to start with styles because this is my recommended strategy on porting content over from your existing site. So what you want to do is bring up your existing site. And what we're going to first make note of are the various colors used throughout your site. We can first take a look actually at which colors were brought in over from your existing site. As I mentioned under the appearance area here, these 6 colors would have been imported in, and they'd be imported in under generic names, color 1 through 6. So if I go to styles here and I open up the colors tab, and let's ignore templates for now. I'm not going to dive into this, but this would allow you to set up different styling for say a holiday season, or you're going through a rebranding down the road and you wanted to do a wholesale change on the whole site without actually affecting your live site. You could do so, and then you could switch to the new template you created. Or again, if you created like a Christmas template, you could style the site totally differently. And then come December 26th, you can switch back to your default and you don't have to edit every single thing on your site to get it back to the way it was before. But not going to dive into that today. We're really just focused on getting your existing site moved over, and you don't need templates for that. So within colors here, I'm going to expand solid colors, and we've already began work on our site, but when you first go in here, you'll only have 6 colors. They'll be labeled 1 through 6 pretty generically, and it will have pulled over this palette right here. So what you want to do with this, I would recommend renaming these colors so that they are named contextually. That's going to be the theme throughout this. Name things so that when you're selecting them down the road, you know where they are in use or what they're for. Pretty simply, if you have different shades of like blue or black or something, you may want to say like, oh, this is for paragraph text black, or this is headline black. Be smart with your naming, it'll save you down the road. I'm going to check out our site, and what we want to do is we want to find maybe any colors that are in use for text or backgrounds or whatnot that weren't automatically added over here. So I'm going to go to my consumer site and just have a look at my homepage. I've got my kind of dark gray, it's almost black. I've got our blue, it's actually a gradient, which I can show you in a second. Got a blue used here. That's already added on the designer here, mosaic blue. So that looks good. So nothing new that looks like I need to add for my home page, but I know specifically, say if I go to my schools and teachers page, there's a color here that isn't on my list. So this is where I can use an eyedropper tool. Firefox has one built in the little toolbar, in the upper right corner. We can go to more tools and then eyedropper, and I can just click anywhere, but you can download these plugins for any browser to make finding colors really simple. You just select a sample and then it copies over the hex code for that color. So I've just copied that color over. Going back to the designer, I can go click on the new button to add a new color. Call this sunrise. Paste in that hex code in the hex box, and there's a preview of my color right there. Pretty cool. You can also, with this color slider, adjust the opacity, how transparent this color is. So you can make colors kind of see-through, which helps with layering effects. This also helps if you're adding background shadows to text or whatever. Sometimes drawing that down to, only be 30% opaque will let you achieve the desired effect you'd like. But you can get creative with some cool layering stuff with that opacity slider. I'm just going to keep it fully opaque. Choose save. It's now added to my solid color swatch list, sunrise. There we go. I can now use it elsewhere on my site. That's pretty cool. There's also gradients, which we've added one for the mosaic fade, the blue fade. But gradients are like colors, except you have another slider here to set different stop points. So I can click on here, choose a different color, and then I can even click here. I want to add another stop point, and I want to make it blue, and I can make some pretty crazy looking gradients, changing the direction. I'm not going to go into too much detail on all these options. It's just easier if you explore and figure it out on your own, but you do have that option to add gradients. So with colors added, go through your site top to bottom, add all those colors. You can of course add them as you go or as you come across them, but it's sometimes just nice to try to get the low-hanging fruit, the most obvious things, get some stuff set up in advance so that as you start designing, you're not stopping every few minutes and saying, oh, I need to grab this color. Oh, and I now need to grab this. It's kind of getting everything preloaded, getting your supplies ahead of time. Under the fonts tab here, we're making it much easier on the new site to add custom fonts, whether it's a font that you have locally. If you are going to use a font that you have the file for, it has to be a web-based font. The whole web runs around WFF and WFF2 font files. They don't run on TTF or OTF font files. Those are desktop font files. So you have to have a WFF or WFF2 if you want to use that, but you can upload it. But the other thing is the Google fonts. That is probably what most of you are going to be using. And in fact, that's what we use on the site as the default. So you'll notice that everyone will have pop-ins loaded by default. That is what is currently used on the consumer site. So as I go through the site here, browse or the cart or checkout, all that is in pop-ins. It is your preloaded default font. It is in fact a Google font. You can add additional Google fonts quite simply. So I'll just quickly overview that because it's good to know. I'm going to open up a new tab, and if I Google Fonts, I can head over to the first hit, Google Fonts. Google Fonts contains about 1,600 free open source fonts, meaning that you do not have to attribute the designer. You don't have to pay Google anything. You don't have to do anything with it. You can just use it forever. It's great. And I'm just going to show you quickly how to add something like this one, Truculenta. I'm just clicking on a random font. So I'm clicking on one here, and if I want to add this to my site, there's a Get Font button. Click on that. I'm going to choose Get Embed Code. And you're either going to choose a font which is called variable, or it's going to have predetermined files like font sizes. So those are the two fonts you're now going to find on Google. We can work with both variable and the other fonts. The only thing is that if you are going to use a variable font, what you need to select here is you need to change the styles or choose one value in order to use it. So if I choose change styles under weight and width, I need to make sure that both of these are set to one value. So that I've selected one value here, and then I need to select off what the parameters I want here. So you can either use the slider here to get really custom. I want my font to be, in between regular and medium. I want it to be 435. Like that's what a variable font is. It lets you really dial in the size. When you get up above here, you get a little preview of what you're doing as you change the slider. But really most people will just want to say, well, I want bold, and I want the expanded version, or maybe I want the normal width of it. Every variable font has different options, but either way, what you want to do is just select a single weight and a single width. And once you've got those selected, you're going to choose the @import option here, not the link, and you're going to copy this code. With the other fonts, with a non-variable font, so if I jump back to just a regular one that has just different styles like this Bevan here, if I go Get Font on Bevan, I'm just going to remove the Truculenta, and then we'll get Embed Code here. So if you've got a font where you don't have a slider for variable sizing, that sort of stuff, it's just going to select off all the weights of that font. So regular and regular italic. We need to only import one at a time. So make sure you are only importing one variant at a time, because that is how our system is designed. Some of these font families have like 16 or 20 extra light all the way up to black and all the italics in between. It could be like 16 or 20 different font files in the end. And maybe the store only wants to use one or two of them. If you upload all 16 or 20 fonts for a family, you're actually going to have to load those, or your customer's device will have to load all of those variants when they visit your site, even if you're only using one or two. And this could slow down the loading of your site or eat their data if they're on their mobile device and maybe they don't have a good data plan. So this is where, again, we're making it so that you have to upload one at a time. So all I have to do is just deselect all the other ones, or just select just a single one. So all I've got selected is just regular here. That's it. And then I'm good to go. But either way, with a variable font or with a static font here, I choose the @import option here, and then I copy the code. And then I go back to the Webstore Designer, choose Add Google Font, give it a name. What was this one called? Bevan? Yes, I would call it Bevan. I guess it is kind of a bold font, so I just go Bevan Bold, give it its name so that it's obvious. We give you a bit of a breadcrumb here. It says @import as the placeholder text. So you can see right here, we're giving you that hint. If you're forgetting, like, oh, do I choose the link or the @import? It's the @import. Paste that in there, choose upload font. Bevan Bold is in my list of fonts I can use. Hooray! Cool. It's as easy as that. So you can add as many Google fonts as you want. Any ones that you're actually not using anywhere on your site, I would remove them, delete them out of here so that you're removing that overhead. And if you say remove a font by accident, oops, I removed it, And I went, oh no, I didn't mean to do that. It's actually still saved on the back end. It's not loaded for your customers, but we've saved it on the back end. So you can go to select from uploaded at the top here. And then from the drop down, you'll see Bevan is there, Bevan Vold. I can reselect it and save it and get it back on my list if I want to use it. I'm going to remove it because our store doesn't use this font. We've got a custom one, Recoleta Bold, already loaded in there. I can use that for my example test. With fonts out of the way, we can move on to text presets. This is the big one. This is the concept that will keep your site consistent and allow you to manage content and keep everything looking similar, and also updating things down the road. If you go through branding changes, this will make things a lot easier. When you first load your Webstore Designer, it's going to just have some defaults set in there, just giving you something to chew on, something to jump off. So you'll have headlines 1 through 4 loaded, and then a paragraph 1 and 2, and then a footnote 1. We've already begun the work of renaming them and adjusting them to our own needs. And we've also added on to the baseline 6 or whatever we've loaded for you. So you can have as many text presets as you want. And this is where part of this initial process is assessing, well, how many do we need? And also maybe consolidating some to simplify your life. But this is where you're going to go through your site and pick a page. And I'm going to choose, say, the home page. And we're going to identify the various stylings we need to create, the presets. All that means is just finding the different types of text, size or shape or color that is used on your site. So right off the bat on my homepage, I've got some text here. So I need to make a headline for this. Think about it contextually, naming them so that for use later down the road, you know where it was used or where you can use it. So I'd probably call this one homepage subheadline white. Something like that. I also have a headline above my button grid. So that's where I could name this one button grid headline. Pretty simple. I have some text for buttons here. So I'll need to make buttons styled a certain way. I've got a headline for my lists, it looks like, and that's all the same. And then there's a sub headline for my lists as well. As I scroll down, they're all the same lists, and I've got a big image acting as a button for my staff picks page, so I actually don't need to worry about this text because this is just a graphic element that I don't need to recreate in text. So really I've got that handful of stuff on my homepage that I need to recreate. So this is where, going back to the Webstore Designer, I could then either use the new button to add a new style, or in your case, I would recommend just editing the very first one and changing its name and then changing the pieces behind it. So if I expand any of this, and I've got to actually expand something where I can see some text, say list headline. This is again on my site right now. I've got a list headline that I'm creating. This is where you get access to all the various settings for this preset. So you set the font here, you can choose it from the list, you choose the size, you get a little preview here as you make changes, you can see what you're doing to it. You can choose spacing between characters, the line height, padding, color, underline, text shadow, borders, background color, background shadow. There's lots of options to really create some interesting looking text here. And as you make changes or tweaks here, you'll find that a blue button at the top lights up that says Save Changes. So this isn't live as you were making tweaks. Say this text was in place on your current live site. It wouldn't be like things are jumping around to your customers. Instead, you make all your changes here, and then once you feel like, yes, this is good, then you click the Save Changes button. If you accidentally click out of this, like say you click the Content tab without saving changes, it's going to warn you, and you have the choice between revert and save. This is also a handy way is if you changed a font and you didn't mean to, or made some changes and went, oh, I didn't mean to do that, let's reset it back. You can just click out and then choose revert, and it's going to set it back to the way it was before. Otherwise, though, the Save Changes button is important to commit those changes. You can make multiple changes to multiple styles and then hit Save Changes at the end. There is also, with every text preset, there's a duplicate button. So if you're creating a text preset and all you really want to do is say change the color of it, like, oh, I have an instance of this I want to use, but now I've got a different color background, or I just want to modify its color. There is a duplicate button here, so you can click on that to duplicate the preset, and then at that point just change a few things and away you go. Pretty nice that way. There's also a reset button here, which will reset these back to the very default parameter like that we've set, or kind of a very baseline. You probably won't be using this very much, and you can only delete the last preset on every list. This is to do with templates. It's by design. So just know that in order to have templates function the way they will, you can only remove the last color on the list or the last text preset in the list, because the position of all of these presets, like their actual position on this list, is important to the functionality of templates. Won't get into it too much right now, but just know this was by design. Just be aware that yes, you can't really move these around or reorder them. All you can do is kind of rename them and change them or delete back up. So once you've gone ahead and had a look through your site and started to edit the existing presets to match what you've got going on your site, and then also using the new button to add additional presets. And again, you're just getting things close, like just a rough sketch. Like we don't know exactly if this is going to be, the list headline that I roughly sketched is going to be matching this verbatim. It's easier if you had, say, a dual monitor, you'd be able to get it closer that way. But even then, while we're initially working with this, we're just trying to create a rough sketch of the various headlines and texts that are around the site. Okay, well, we've got like a sub headline for our lists, right? So if I go to the designer here, I've got a list subheading, and there we go. I've got it styled out to look the same, including the border on the left. We've got, again, lots of cool options where I can say like, oh, I want a border just on the left, or maybe I want a border left top, or a shadow, or this or that. So you can get pretty creative with all this stuff. But we've sketched out on our site the various headlines used around the site. You can do the same. And then once you've done that, we can move on to buttons. Buttons works very similar. If you've got any buttons on your site right now, this is where I would need to make one that does something similar to this, but you can have as many buttons as you want. We have just one default one loaded for you. It has similar controls to the text where you can choose font and size and styling, all that stuff. The only difference is that you have, with buttons and links, you have two states. You have an initial state and a hover and a focus, right? Buttons, when you hover over it or you focus it, it'll change. So you need to style both of those. So you can click on this little slider here to style the hover state, and then you can click on this one to style the initial state. So that's the only nuance there. But create a few buttons. You can swap out the button used on lists. I think most stores will probably have 2 or 3 buttons at most, because they'll have a button maybe that they're using throughout the site here in a grid, or maybe below an image, something that would say like read more. And then you can also swap out the button that's used on the list. See this little right arrow and left arrow that shows up on list sliders? You can actually change that button out to whatever you want. Site text allows you to change the default font, base font used on your site. Now, this is not going to change the font used in Browse and your cart. This is because this will be using pop-ins for the time being. Everyone's site, no matter what default font or base font you choose, it's going to still use pop-ins here, because this is such a sensitive area. We need to have a font that has the full Latin extended character set. The font has to render accents correctly and look good on small screens or screens of various sizes. The actual width and height of the font, even though 14 pixels is the size of the font, that's not always the case. Like you could have a different font that 12 pixels looks totally different than another font in 12 pixels, at least in how much space it takes up. We need to make sure that if we do allow you to swap out the font that's used within Browse and your cart, very important processes, fundamental processes checking out on your site, that you don't choose something that breaks this functionality. So we'll be opening this up down the road, maybe at first from a preset selection of fonts that we've vetted and we know will work for cart and checkout. But if we do open it up fully, then the onus is going to be on you to make sure that you didn't choose something that's going to break your customer's experience. So for now, for the first release, we're keeping it safe and simple. You got pop-ins. So here, what this base font setting does is just sets the default for new content blocks, and then also will set what the menu system and the footer are in, which you can actually override on an individual basis too. So this may have very little utility across your site if you say set a different font, or manually set the font up here and then manually set the font down here. Then this really isn't doing much, but there you go. Link styles is like buttons, where again, throughout the site, there are various places you can place links. Either if you create a block of text and make like a word or a phrase a hyperlink to somewhere else, you then select a link style. Your lists, if I go back to our site and look at a list here, it Happy Easter. This view all products, that's a hyperlink. You can again style that. So this is where we need to allow you to add multiple hyperlink styles. And these are a lot more simple in terms of styling. Usually it's just going to be whatever text style is applied, and it's just going to do an alteration, like a color alteration, or when you hover it, it does an underline. So like the button, you have a hover, focus, and an initial state. And the most basic thing is just to apply an underline to the hover state. But you can do things like, change the color as well. So when I hover it, it goes from being blue to black and underlined. Either way, just make sure you choose something that is obvious, that does change. So don't set this so that it does nothing when I hover it, because that is no longer WCAG or ADA compliant. Links have to have a style change in order for them to be compliant and obvious as a link. The last section is the backgrounds. Pretty simple. If you had a background image or texture used on your existing site, that will have been ported over automatically for you and set, but you can remove that or use a solid color or just set it to white. You can also change the container background of your site. So on your current site, you'll find that this is the kind of main container. So all our lists right now are in a container and the background is white. On the old site, you could not change that. On the new system, you can actually change that color if you want from your color palette, or you can set it to be transparent. So if I made it transparent, that would make this whole section see-through and show the texture, the image I have behind it. Not much to really fiddle with there, but there you go. You got a little more control. So with the Styles tab out of the way, I'm going to now move over to the Content tab, how to actually place content. So I'm going to click on that, and I had made some changes in here, so I'll click on Revert because I don't want to save those. And this is where you get access to all the various blocks, components we call them, that you can drop in, edit, and modify. But right off the bat, you have two targets you can drop content on. You can either drop content on a selected page. That's the default. That's what's always selected when you go here. So I can choose a page here, like home, and that's the page I'm working on. I'm dropping content there. I can also choose the option global banner. This will allow me to place content, and whatever I place here will appear on every page on my site, whether it's the cart or checkout or browse or a custom page. Doesn't really matter. Wherever you go, this content will appear. In practice, likely the only time you're going to use this is perhaps for an above search bar banner or a pop-up, something you just want to draw your customer's attention to. Under the component section, there is a pop-ups and notices. I can click and drag in an above search bar notice. I'm not going to style or do anything with it. Here's just the placeholder text. It says above search bar notice. And then if I click the preview button here at the top, you can actually see where it's going to appear. Above search bar notice. This is any page I go to. If I go to our gift cards page, it's going to still say above search bar notice. It's there everywhere. So this would be helpful for something like, oh, you're doing a promo code, or maybe your store's hours are extended or contracted for a weekend or something, or you've got some free shipping promotion going on, free shipping over $150. You've seen this on websites before, and you can style it. You can change the color, the text. Another option here is the pop-up notice. So this would be a more in-your-face version of the above search bar notice if you wanted to actually have a pop-up fired whenever a customer visits any page on your site, at least the first time they visit your site. However they get there, this pop-up will happen. So if I go preview, you get a pop-up notice, and then there you go. But if I go to another page now, it's not going to pop up again. It's only the first time I visit a page on my site that would happen. You can actually put a pop-up on just a selected page, so only when you visit that selected page will the pop-up enact. I'm going to remove these real quick, and I'll get to these editing commands in a second, but I'll just clear out our global banner so that it's not everywhere and go back to selected page. And in this example, I'm going to be roughly recreating our homepage from Mosaic Books, or at least giving you the strategy or the way you should tackle this. So let's first have a look at Mosaic's homepage, and I want to get a rough lay of the land. And what I'm first starting with is this rough layout. I'm going to have a look at the various types of content I've got already placed if I'm trying to recreate it verbatim. Looks like I've got an image stretching edge to edge on my screen. I've got a text banner below that, black background, white text. Below that, I've got a little space, and then I have another headline above my button grid, more blank space. Then I get into some lists, Happy Easter, and in those list headlines have a subheadline, and then it's followed by a carousel list of titles. And then it looks like that is just repeated over and over and over again until I get to the very bottom, which is a big image with my staff picks image that links to our staff picks page. If I want to recreate that on the new system, I'm going to head over here. I'm going to make sure I'm on the home page here. Select the menu you want to be on. With this list of components, my first thing is I need a big image going side to side of my screen. I'm going to expand text and images, and I've got blank space, headline and paragraph, yada, yada, but image is what I want. Click and drag that in. And there we go. I've got a block. It doesn't have anything like an image. All I want to do is just get something in place. And I think that's probably the best method for this, is just to get the rough outline. After the image on my site, I had a black bar with some white text on it. So I can find, okay, that'll be achieved by a headline and paragraph. You can have either or, even though this example has a headline and paragraph text, you can remove the paragraph text to just have a headline, or you can remove the headline text just to have a paragraph. And really, what's the difference between the two? They're basically the same thing at the end of the day, but just this is our starting point. After that, which we'll style to look like this bar in a second, I have a space. So blank space, I can add some space. And then I've got another headline and paragraph that I need for my button grid. And then I'm actually going to have the button grid itself. So if I collapse text and images and go to the buttons, there is a button grid. So I'll drag that in place. Then after that, I've got a spacer. And then after that, I get into my actual lists. So we've got a list, so it's a headline and some subtext, so paragraph text and a headline that'll be achieved that way, as well as the actual slider. So if I go here and add in headline and paragraph, and I'll collapse the text and images and go to product lists and features, we've got a new option, which is product grid. So whereas the slider is just that, it's a single row that you slide through titles, a grid allows you to assign a grid. Oh, I want to have 3 titles wide by 4 titles deep or down. And this is better for, I'd say, a finite featuring of titles, or if you really wanted to focus in on some titles, give a big presence. But in this case, I'm just going to duplicate what's currently on our site. So I'm going to click over the product slider here, drop it in place. And I'm going to stop at this point, because what's going to happen is once I've created my Happy Easter one, I can just duplicate this over and over again and then just change out the text and the actual list. But in terms of like the styling, the layout, the placement, all the settings therein, to keep everything consistent, I can just duplicate the first one I make and then make some subtle changes after that. When I get into the editing controls, so you have, whenever you hover over a component, you get some initial options, but there's a ... option that expands to give you a quick delete, a duplicate, and then also a move to a different page. So say I started creating this and realized, oh, I'm on the home page. I meant to do this on my staff picks. I can now choose to put this on my staff picks instead, move it to a page. That's what that move is. To actually move the content block around, there's a little button here that I click and I hold, and then I can drag and reorganize where things go on this particular page. So with some content in place, or at least the rough layout of what my homepage is going to look like, I can now go to the top and start editing each one of these blocks to get them dialed in to the real thing. So if I click on edit, all content blocks need a name, so you have to give it a name. So I'd call it like top, banner image. By default, all of your content is set to draft mode when you first drag it in. You might as well, since you are just recreating your new site and none of your pages are activated yet. Again, there's that whole activate button at the top. You got to build out each page and then activate them when you're ready. Since nothing is activated yet, you might as well just set your content to visible as you're creating all this new content, so that it saves you some clicks when you want to make it go live. You can schedule every content block, a start and end date. It's by default blank, but you can put that in there. And then we get into the various options, which I'll let you explore with. Every single content block has its own unique set of options. We've tried to add tooltips to as many things as possible. So if you're hovering over an icon, like what is this little weird arrow thing? Add padding to the top and bottom. If there's a background color applied, this will extend that color. Feel free to hover around. If we're missing any tool tips or things that needs clarification, let us know. It's better just to trial and error, click around and see what these buttons do. Oh, what happens if I click a background color? Oh, okay, I see what this is doing. Okay, and then, oh, what does the select button do? Oh, this looks like it's where I'm actually gonna grab the image. Oh, cool. Okay, so I can grab an image there, and oh, what does this now do? Oh, I see. All right. It's worth just exploring and seeing what you can do with each of these options. But the idea is once you've dialed this all in, you've got things set the way you want it to be done. You can click on Save Changes at the top, and that will save those changes. Now, this doesn't look like my home page at all because I grabbed the wrong image. There we go. I think I found something. Maybe it was this one right here, or it's this one right here. I think that's it. Cool. So I can quickly, by dialing this in, get something very close. I think I have some padding around it. That's the only difference. But if I click on preview, it's getting close to what my real site is looking like. You'll just have to trial and error with the various options to dial that in. When we get onto things like a headline and paragraph, so if I edit this is again where we're now going to be leveraging all of our text presets that we've created before, at least the jumping off point. So you'll find, along with all the other standard options, positioning and width and text align and padding, that sort of stuff where you want this block aligned, you have a section for your heading preset and your paragraph preset. This is where you use the drop down to select, I want list subheading. It's going to apply all the text styling that we did set up before. In this case, this would be like page headlines white, or maybe this was what we're going to use. That's quite large actually. What was it called? Main page subhead white. So it's white text right now. This is where I'd probably at this point at the very bottom here, there's a background color. I'm going to set this to my mosaic black so that I can actually see it. I can grab the text from my site, copy that, Control C, paste that into the heading text area. And as I type, it live, updates on the site here. But there's for the heading, it's just a really basic paste box for the text. Since I don't have paragraph text, I've just got this headline here. I don't need to select a preset for the paragraph. I can just choose edit text, Control A to select it all, or just click and drag, delete it out. Now I don't have any paragraph text. Max width, I'd set this a little bit wider because I don't want the text to wrap. It's getting pretty close to what my existing site is, maybe just a little bit taller, this black area, so I can adjust the padding here up a bit. And then also set this container to be 100% width of the screen. Click save. And now if I preview this, it's looking a lot closer to what is going on my actual homepage. Pretty cool. The only difference is this little spacing around the image. That's actually done just through padding. If I edit the image and go down, there's some padding here at the top and bottom. I'd set that to 0, and I'd set this left and right to 0 as well. And then now I should have an apples to apples comparison. If I switch between the two, very little changes, you can see. With this in mind, you can go through and start to edit each one of these blocks. If you find down the road that like, okay, well, this text preset that I've originally took a stab at, it's not perfect or I need to refine it. This is where you can go to the Styles tab, choose text presets. This one was called the main page subhead white, W for white. I think we're expanding the characters here to add a little bit more, but I can expand this. And if I change anything, if I up the size, well, that's going to change in real time. If I change the font, I want to change it to Recoleta now. I want to change the color to blue. As you make all these changes, you can see it for real on your site. So this is where refining your presets, once you've placed some content, some components, and selected presets therein, that'll be the best approach to refining it. But it's nice just to have a jumping off point, these headlines here on a list so that you can select them and apply them and then come back and refine them later. So I'm not going to save changes. I'm going to revert that back to the way it was before. So most of these component blocks, these content blocks, are self-explanatory. I'll let you explore and see what you can do with each one. Just know that the trickiest one is definitely the side-by-side text and image. It just has the most options and it has the most area to make it look kind of funky or weird or do some strange stuff on mobile. So just make sure if you drop in a side-by-side text and image, one, that you are definitely clicking on preview and looking at it on your phone to make sure, looking at the phone preview to make sure it's rendering the way you expect, because you can do some strange stuff with alignment where it like looks great on desktop, but then on phone, it's this skinny little column of text or the image is moved halfway off the phone screen. So just know that you can make it look good on both, but it can take a little trial and error to do that. So give us a shout if you get stuck there. What I do need to focus on or show you a little more details about are the actual product end of things, the product slider. So the product sliders, we've got the three options. We've got product slider, product grid, and then a single title feature. But the product slider and product grid, the actual products that populate these, so when I edit into this list, the slider, I have a usual set of options. There is a drop-down menu here called My List, and this is where you actually select the list. And these lists come from your biz site. You should hopefully be familiar with the biz site and creating lists there, but both static and dynamic lists are created and managed on biz, and then you select them here to actually place them. But the content itself is done on biz. It's kind of like the events as well. So events are created on biz, but then the actual where the event calendar appears or how your event page looks is styled on the Webstore Designer. I'll show you quickly how to make the two different types of lists, a static list and a dynamic list. So I'm going to jump over to our biz site. So back to biz.bookmanager.com, logged in here. First way of creating a static list is just by doing some searching or filtering. And essentially at this point, there is a My List button attached to every single title. So if I scroll down, every title will have a My Lists. I can click on My Lists. It's then going to pop up all my lists and I can search through them right here, but this is just listed by ones that are quick picked. It always shows the titles already on a list. Those are at the top and then followed by your most recently updated or created lists. You can use a blue create button to create a new list. You can also, as I said, search. So I could go like staff Trev, see if my staff picks list comes up. I've made this into a quick pick on my site. When I select off the QP button here, it then adds it as a quick selector down below every title, which means I don't have to say click this My List button every time and search for staff picks Trevor. Since I've made this a quick pick, it is now just a checkbox everywhere on the site that I can just click, and this is now on my staff picks list. So this helps you if you're making a specific list and you're trying to tag a bunch of titles to it through the browsing area. The best thing to do is create the list and then immediately make it a quick pick. So that's one method for creating a static list of titles. The other way is if you have a pile of books next to you and a scanner hooked up to the computer, you can just scan those in. And that's where you can go to purchasing, My Lists. You can go create a new list. A static list is selected by default. At the bottom here, I can choose text. And this is where when I click in here, I can either just type in ISBNs or I can use my scanner to scan them in. If you have a notepad file or an Excel spreadsheet containing ISBNs, you can click and drag or click here to upload it. So that's another way of getting a list onto your site. Whenever you're creating a list, you can choose a sort by and you can categorize it to help you filter it later down the road. And you've got your other basic options like hiding non-on-hand, on-order titles. So as things maybe sell out, they drop off the list. So the second way of creating, or the second type of list, is what's called the dynamic list. And that means that you don't have a definite set of ISBNs. Instead, you're going to set up browse filter presets to then pull in the ISBNs for that list. And it dynamically updates as things change. So if one of your presets is, stock status, what's in store, so I only want to see titles that are in store. Well, as things that become no longer available on hand, those titles will drop off the list on your site. You can also set other parameters, like under scope, I could set released last week and releasing this week. So I just want to see a list of titles that are on hand, what's in store, releasing this week. And I forgot to add last week. I got to use the little green checkbox if I want to add more than one. So I can go. So releasing this week, released last week, what's in the store. Those green boxes will tell me the filters I've got selected. Just as a little caveat to this or an aside, if you when you first start off in this area, the active filter is shown by default, and active means like 12 million titles, pretty much anything that is out there that you could possibly order that's in print. So if you go ahead and say select scope and you use initially the check mark, say releasing this week, releasing last week, and if I click out of this, it's going to retain that active filter, which means it's saying, well, show me everything that's releasing this week and last week, but also show me everything else that's active. So really those filters had no effect on this. So just make sure that if you are wanting to filter this down, if you're selecting multiple filters at once, you need to just manually remove that active filter for it to actually get to the ones that you want. Another approach to this is if you just select a single filter at one at a time, like if the first filter I select, I just click on it, it's going to automatically remove active by default. That's a little caveat that can sometimes trip people up. Anyway, I'm going to go back to this whole released last week, releasing this week, stock status, what's in store, and then maybe let's just go subject fiction. So this is going to be my fiction new releases that are in my store. Cool. Once I've selected off the parameters here, the filters, and that includes even the sort here, I can use this drop-down sort and choose a different sort method. I could even refine. I could choose all this off and put in another keyword like dogs and have all my fiction dog books that came out in the past week or whatever. You can filter all that down. You can refine it. And then once you're done, once you've got everything the way you want it looking and scroll through the titles, yeah, that's looking good. You can choose the filter preset button. And then at the top, create new preset. We can call new release fiction. Save. So now that I've got this saved as a browse filter preset, which I can use just internally, oftentimes buyers are using these to create special lists to help speed up their buying or filling in gaps for reorders. But once I've created a filter preset, now I need to tell the site, well, I want to use this as a list for my consumers as well. So this is where I head over to purchasing, my lists, create. I change the tab from static list to list from filter preset. It's redundant, but give it a name, new release fiction. I think it's say OH on hand. And then under here, filter preset, I select this. The most recent created filter preset will be at the top. So I can just select that one, click on save, and that is it. Now, if I go back to the Webstore Designer here, and I just need to cancel out of this. If I was editing into it, it needs to refresh basically. So once I cancel and edit back in, if I go to my list, the drop down, you'll see new release fiction on hand is at the top of the list. It will again show you here your most recently updated list, but you can type to search keyword as well. So click on that. The titles will now drop in. It's the same that was on Biz here. Cool. And now I can adjust some other options like, okay, I want to change out the previous next button from being kind of the default black one to the button I've styled now. I want the images to be medium. You can go quite huge with the images or quite small if you want. We can adjust how many titles the user can scroll before they have to view the whole list. You can adjust the spacing between this and whether you want to show the author or the title below. All these little options, new options are great. So I'll just give this a save here. And now I've got a list on my site looking pretty cool. Lists in a nutshell should hopefully be easier to maintain and manage on this new system. You just got to remember you got to initiate that from the browse side. With the rest of this content, I'll let you explore what buttons do, what the events are, pop-ups and notice. We've kind of talked a little bit about that, widgets, third-party plugins. This will probably expand as we need to add more plugins, maybe a constant contact newsletter sign up. Right now, we've just got one for MailChimp. That seems to be the most popular. We'll be adding more. The very bottom one, I just wanted to note about the custom HTML. We haven't fully blocked this off yet. There are going to be corner cases where this is needed. Definitely talk to us first. And if you try to use it, you will get a disclaimer that says, warning, this can break stuff. Please talk to us first to see if we can achieve what you're looking to do on your behalf, like basically create a component, build one into the site to handle your request instead of you using custom HTML. You have to make sure whatever HTML you're using, CSS, it's going to work for the various screen sizes and also browsers. What we've discovered in building this whole system is that things will look great on Firefox and Chrome, but then something will break on Safari, and we have to write special coding to say handle Safari. There may be instances where we will give you the thumbs up and said, yep, you know, you can use this. This will work. This is the only way to do this right now. That's fine. Don't worry. We're not going to waive your support for the site. We just want to try to preempt that by saying, just don't go rogue on us with this thing. Use it very sparingly or not at all. You may come across some cool things on other websites that you want to implement on yours. That's great. That's fine. Maybe we can create it with our existing system. Maybe there's a creative way to use something already here to do what you need to do. But if not, we'd maybe like to add it. So not only we can, again, control for those different screen sizes and browsers, but so that our other users can take advantage of that cool feature too. So with the content tab out of the way, a brief overview here, let's move with the last one, which is the menu tab. It's pretty self-explanatory, but one thing you'll notice is that all of our menus right now on Mosaic's site are all grayed out and they have a little red asterisk next to them. And that's a visual indicator that all of these pages, every one of our pages except for this kids one, these are pages that have not been activated. They all have this little button and banner at the top that says this page is not live, giving us a bit of a report card on, well, what pages do we still have to convert over and then activate to replace the old content systems page. Everything right now. At a glance, we can see we have to do everything so far, and that's fine. But that just gives you a quick visual of like what you've got left to work on and what pages need to be activated. So once again, you can chip away at a home page here, get it all ready when you feel like, yep, this is it. Let's get rid of our old one. That's where you click the blue activate button. It's a point of no return. You'll activate it, and then you will essentially be using your new content creator for that particular page, and the old site's content will not be used. And in this manner, you can chip away, whether you want to do it over a concentrated effort and spend a week or so rebuilding your whole site and getting it done, and then on one day just going through quickly and activating everything so it swaps it over. Or if over the next few months, only as you need to make changes to a particular page, will you then use the new system, rebuild it, and then activate it. And then over that period of 5-6 months, you can then again convert over your existing site. Well, you have plenty of time to convert over your existing site. So it's not going to be like 2 months from now, we're going to say, we're retiring the old site. You have to get this all ported over. But also don't drag your feet on it. I can imagine within a year or so, we're going to want to retire the old admin site. And so we will eventually announce a kind of a hard deadline of, as of this date, you must have ported your content over or be using the new system. Otherwise, we're going to retire the old system and your site will kind of blank out. We'll be giving you plenty of warning about all that, but it's good just to sort of chip away at this leading up to that so you're not caught with a month deadline to try to port over your whole site. Now with the menu area here, reorganizing menus on the new system is really easy. It's just clicking and dragging. So that's how you can reorganize where this all goes. And as I mentioned, this is a live system. So right now, if I look at my current site, I've got gift cards and then staff picks. So if I go to this new system and I go and I drag staff picks above gift cards and I go back and refresh my live consumer site, staff picks is now ahead of gift cards. So again, this system is actually live. What is controlling your menus? So if I change the name of a menu here, if I reorganize it, even though it's not activated, the content isn't activated, the page menu, like the text itself and its organization is live here. So I'm going to put that back so that my site now switches back to gift cards and then staff picks. So just keep that in mind. And if you wanted to make a menu a sub-menu, you just click and drag to where you want it to be, drag it to the right, and you'll see now it pops underneath that one and it shows that this will now be a sub menu. Also, when you're creating new menus, you can just make it a sub menu from this list right off the get-go. I want to make this new menu a sub menu of browse or something like that. And like the regular content, when you're creating a new page or menu, it's going to automatically be set to draft mode. There is no activate button on a brand new menu you create because the activate is really only a function that's needed to transition existing Webstore menus and content over to the new system. So if it's a brand new menu, it didn't exist on the old system, there's no need for an activate button. The last little point I want to make is about the third status you can see for a menu. So you've got a green active visible, then you have your orange draft mode, and then there's a purple unlisted. And those are for pages that you have active on your site, but it's not in our top menu system. Instead, I get to our terms and conditions for the footer of our site, view our terms and conditions. So this doesn't exist in the menu system at the top, but it's linked to. So unlisted pages are used for that. They can also be used for, say, you're created a special page for a school or teachers, and you basically want to send out an email and say, oh, check out these titles we've featured or we've made for you, or that we've built a page for you on our site. But again, you didn't want that page to be part of the menu system so that any customer could access it. It's only through a link. That's where an unlisted page comes into play. The last little area on this menu section is to do with the top search bar, the navigation bar, and the footer. That's where you edit these sections. So the top search bar isn't edited through anywhere else. You just go to your menus, scroll to the very bottom, and then here there's a pencil icon, top search bar. It gives you basic controls like last time, except you get a few more options like, do you want this thing to be full width of the site? Do you want this to actually hide when you're scrolling down the site? Swap out the logo. You can now change the padding above and below the logo so you can make a fatter or skinnier search bar. You can also change the logo height, your usual coloration options here. So play around with those. Same thing for the navigation menu. You can change out the font here, play with the text a little bit more. And that's, again, same goes with the footer. You have very limited controls, but if we're missing anything here that you want to change or update, just let us know. Again, we're happy to log and create new features. Our new system's a lot easier to edit and add and tweak things. We really appreciate and encourage feedback about anything here. And that is it in a nutshell. I'd say that is your general strategy. So just a real quick overview again, having your site open in another tab or another window, starting off in the styles area to essentially sketch out your colors, your fonts, your text presets in basic. And then you're going to go ahead, choose a page, maybe not your home page. Well, you can, tackle it however you want. But maybe you want to start with like a lesser page. Like in our store's case, we're starting off with our staff picks page. We're going to rebuild this first. And then as a tester and see how it goes. This is where you then use your content tab to click and drag, drop some components in place to get the rough outline of it, the rough organization. And that's where then you can use your edit button to dial in each content block, specify the text presets that are used therein, which then you can jump back to the styles text presets area to then further tweak those, refine them to get them just right. Wash, rinse, repeat that process until you've rebuilt your site. Remembering again that the activate button is what makes it for real. Otherwise, everything is kind of in a test mode. And if I were to activate this page right now, again, the one gotcha is right now the only thing that would show up is this top banner, because that is the only thing in green. Everything else is circled in orange, kind of telling me this is in draft mode and will not display yet. So just make sure before you activate a page that everything that you want to be visible is green. And that's where you're just going to edit and change the visibility to visible. With that in mind, I hope you have fun with the new system. If you have any questions or get stuck or comments, feel free to give us a call or email. Hopefully this will give you, again, that creative freedom without too many options, but that right balance between enough to make your site stand out a little bit more and make moderating this content a little bit more consistent and allow you to hand it off to staff at the store and they can keep things consistent and fresh without maybe hiring a designer or any coder needed to make it happen. So have fun, and we'll see you on the other side.